friends, thanks for joining me on the very last video on the greenhouse build. In this video we're going to cover 4 quick topics. It's going to be heating, cooling, the finishes, and then just growing in the greenhouse. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is actually cooling at a time when cooling is not the issue that we have right now. So the first way that most of the greenhouses can be cooled is just by venting. So you can just vent with, some open doors, some open windows. People put vents to help encourage natural convection. They'll put some on the small side or the lower end of the wall, and then they'll put another vent at the top. Or if there were opposite sides, a lower vent here and then a higher vent here. That way the cool air gets naturally sucked in, warm air rises, and then as the air is heated, and then it gets vented outside. This is very effective. However, if you live in a really warm climate, this may not be enough, and it could still cause the greenhouse to get overheated. Another issue is if you live in an area with a lot of snow, having vents down low can make it hard to open them because the snow is piled up so high. If the vents are sort of near the plants down below and they open, it could also cause the plants near the bottom to freeze. So this is not an option that we chose just for these reasons. I do get a lot of snow here. We do have plants in the garden beds, which I'm going to actually show you. Actually, no plants yet, but I intend to plant in the garden beds down low. And so we didn't want to have this be our method for cooling. However, if this is a method that you guys want to choose, shoot for something like 8 to 15% of the square footage of the greenhouse being vent space on the walls. Hopefully that makes sense. Say you had just a small greenhouse, it's 100 square feet, so 8 to 15% would be anywhere from 8 square feet to 15 square feet of venting, depending on the climate you live in. If you live in a cold or cloudy climate, you may not need as much. If you live in a really hot and sunny climate, obviously go for the higher amount. So yeah, that's option number 1 for cooling. I will say that it's best not to have any kind of vents in the roof. That was a mistake I made in my last greenhouse. Actually the only main window in the greenhouse was in the roof. And so it worked really well when it came to heat rising, which is why I put it there. I'm like, if you just open it up, it'll just kind of vent all of the hot air that's collecting in there. The problem is when we would shut it, it didn't have the same ability to close tightly. So it was kind of a problem in that water would sometimes leak in. If snow was sitting on there, it would leak in, that sort of thing. So it's best not to have any kind of vents or windows on the roof if you can avoid it. Option number 2 would be to put in some fans. This is much more effective at cooling the greenhouse than the other method. Personally, I think it's best to put them on the west side or the east side, something that's away from the wind. I chose to put them on the east side of our greenhouse. This is a common place for air leaks though, so if you do have a fan, just be careful in the way that you intend to close it off or insulate it, just because this is again a common place for air leaks. So if you have a 4-season greenhouse and you intend to keep it really nice and warm all year, you definitely want to make sure that it has the ability to close up and get winterized to make sure that it doesn't have any of those air leak issues. It's good to have, actually you need an air intake. So having an air intake that's sort of lower on the wall is a good idea, and then somewhere other than that that's higher on the wall with the air going out. So it sucks in the cooler air that's sort of closer to the ground, and then the hotter air that's collecting in the greenhouse getting vented out up high. When it comes to choosing a fan, they're sold based on how many cubic feet it can move, so CFM. And the way that you figure out the cubic feet for your greenhouse is your length times your width times your average height. So let's just use my greenhouse as an example really quick. So it's 8 feet across, it's 34 feet long, and then the average height is about 8.5 feet. So I put that in the calculator and I got just over 2,300 cubic feet that the greenhouse is. So if we were shooting for about a 1/2 to 1 air exchange per minute, which is what your ideal is supposed to shoot for, I would need a fan that was about 1,150 to 2,300 CFM, so that you could make sure that you're getting the right size fan. Now, in addition to size though, there's a couple other considerations that you're going to want to think about when it comes to choosing this fan. You're going to want to make sure it's something that's at least semi-energy efficient, because you will probably have it running for a large portion of time in the summertime. And you also want to think about the noise. Vent fans are notoriously noisy. So if your greenhouse is somewhere near a bedroom or anywhere else, or even just a living area where you spend a lot of time, you don't want something that's going to sound like a jet engine. So try and choose something that's not going to be too noisy. Okay, so let's move on to heating. There are a variety of electric and gas heaters that are designed for greenhouse use. Unfortunately, they're all kind of expensive to buy, and they're all kind of expensive to run. And so my favorite method is actually more of a self-heating method, where you build the greenhouse well enough that you don't actually need as much heating as it would if you didn't build it as well. Like I mentioned in that, the 5 principles to building a solar greenhouse video. So the first one would be to build well to where the whole thing is just insulated really well. That was principle number 2. The third principle was to have a high quality multi-wall glazing material. And then the fourth one, the one I mainly want to talk about the most right now, is thermal mass. Thermal mass is also called the thermal battery, and it's basically the method where the sun heats the material and then it's stored until it's overnight, because most of the time there's an abundant amount of heat in a greenhouse during the day. It's overnight when the temperatures really tend to dip. And so storing some of that excess heat that you get during the day into the night is really what's ideal, in my opinion, and that's what thermal mass does. So thermal mass can come in a lot of different forms. You can have bricks, rock, stone, some people use water, concrete, even the soil. Lots of things can act as thermal mass inside the greenhouse. The more dense a material is, or the more mass it has, the better it's going to work. And dark colors also work better. It's like in the summer when you leave 2 things outside, or you have 2 things outside, something that's black is going to be a lot hotter than something that's white. So if you can choose materials that are darker in color, they'll absorb more heat during the day, get warmer, and then they'll have more heat that they can release overnight. So my choice was to use some breeze, which I'm going to show you here in a quick second, and the soil for the most part. I didn't really have a whole lot of water. I mean, a lot of people will put like water barrels and things like that in their greenhouse. I felt like that wasn't really practical because I don't really have a ton of extra space for that. And so hopefully the amount of thermal mass that we have just naturally on the floor will be enough. And eventually, when we have more money in our budget, we're hoping maybe we can put in some brick on the floor here that will work hopefully even better. And also the soil, just having soil in the greenhouse is going to absorb some of the heat. And we do intend to do some of our growing in the ground. And when you insulate underground, I mentioned this before, the ground inside of the greenhouse stays warmer and therefore will act as a better thermal mass than if you hadn't insulated. So I actually just took a video of the soil temps that were inside of my garden outside. 2 places actually. I did one in the shade and then one in the sun. And then a second time I did in the greenhouse, and you can see the difference in the soil temps. It definitely absorbs more of the heat in the greenhouse, and not only that, but it's able to hold on to that heat. Okay, so taking some quick temps of the soil out here so we can see if it's really worth insulating underneath the ground or not. Here in the shade, it is 29.6 degrees. Let me see if I can get that in Celsius. -1. The soil temp here in the sun isn't really that much better. It looks like it's about 0 degrees, 0.1 Celsius, 0 degrees even, and about 31.6-ish in Fahrenheit. So just right around freezing still. And the soil temp inside of the greenhouse, right around 48 degrees, much warmer. In Celsius again, that is around 8.8 degrees Celsius. Much, much warmer and much better for planting crops. So yes, insulating underground makes a big difference, not only in the plant's growth, but also in the ability for the soil in the greenhouse to act as thermal mass. Okay, let's talk about finishes really quickly. So when it comes to putting in finishes in the greenhouse, I honestly think it's best to treat the whole area like it were the outdoors. Because our last greenhouse, when we were watering, it would splash all over the place, there's dirt, and just sometimes bugs get in here. And so it's really best to just treat it almost like it were an outdoor space, even though it's inside. So when I choose paint to paint, the windowsills or the wood, I always choose exterior grade. And then when it comes to the walls, instead of choosing something like drywall or something else that wouldn't be able to contact a lot of moisture, I use outside or exterior board siding inside the greenhouse. My friend was supposed to come and help finish the greenhouse. Unfortunately, it's not there yet. So hopefully you can just envision what it's going to look like. But yeah, that's what we do. When it comes to like screws or different things that we're building with, you might want to use like a coated screw or a deck screw, something that can handle that high moisture areas. When it comes to trim, like vinyl trim is a really good choice. If not, again, paint it with the exterior paint. Just again, think of the outside finishes that you would use on your outside of your house to be what you're going to choose for the inside of the greenhouse as well. And then finally, growing in the greenhouse. There are obviously several choices that we can choose when it comes to growing in the greenhouse. Growing in the ground is obviously a really good option. Hydroponics is another good choice that a lot of people make. Aquaponics is where you grow in sort of a mixture between growing fish and then using that water toward watering the plants, and then the plants clean the water from the fish leavings. And so it's sort of a symbiotic cycle between the two. We have chosen to do mainly in-ground gardening, but I do have this really cool shipping crate that came with the polycarbonate that I was looking at recently, and I was thinking it would really work well as a hydroponic garden bed. And so maybe in the future when we get enough, ability to buy a pond liner or something like that, we could throw that in there and then start a hydroponic bed in addition. Okay, hopefully you can overlook my construction mess. We were supposed to be again further along than we are right now, but here's what it looks like just sort of as the entire thing from the inside. This is a U-garden. I can come over and show this to you. This is the breeze walkway we have. We just needed something that could level everything out and then provide a good base for bricks later, because that is our, ideal thing that we're going to do in the long run. But for now, this is going to have to work for the winter. And then the one walkway serves both sides of the garden bed. So as you go down in the walkway here, you can get to the garden area on the right and the left, and then all the way at the end you can also access all of the points to the garden out here. Looking back at the other side, this is actually a patio area. Again, excuse my mess, but yeah, we can have a lot of different options. There's a lot of space over there, so I don't think I'm just going to do patio area. And like I mentioned earlier, I might do a small, or actually a fairly big, hydroponic grow bed, so we'll see if that ends up working out. So that's what we have over on this side. I do want to point out the windows and the door, which we can open if we need the ventilation, and the windows are sort of situated lower like I mentioned before. Again, this is all going to be board siding. I just haven't had the chance to get this finished yet. So when we have the fan turned on, we can have the windows over here open, and then over at the other end of the greenhouse, that is actually where the fan is. I have it winterized right now with a piece of foam screwed to it from the outside, just to make sure it's nice and protected for the winter. But as you can see, that's situated nice and high on the wall so that it can exhaust all of that warm air. And as you can see, this is the example of the walls being insulated and what they look like before when we're going to, cover them up with the siding. So anyway, friends, hopefully this video was helpful to you and helping you to plan and build your greenhouse. And if you ever plan on building a 4-season greenhouse, a fabulous 4-season greenhouse, you can do so in a way that will reduce how much it's going to need in heat and cooling costs. So thanks for watching this build series. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you found it helpful. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.